My son's allowed to hit you. As a plumber, I've been inside many homes, fixing everything from clogged drains to leaky faucets. While most of my stories are humorous, this particular incident with an entitled Mom M and her entitled Kid X stands out as a negative experience. It all started on a chilly Tuesday morning. My phone buzzed with an incoming call just as I was finishing my coffee. The caller, it displayed a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, this is Mike from Fix It All Plumbing. How can I help you today?" I answered, my usual friendly tone in place. On the other end, a woman's voice, strained and slightly frantic. "Hi, Mike. This is Mrs. Thompson. I need some urgent help with my kitchen sink. It's not working at all, and I don't know what to do. My husband used to handle these things, but he's—" I sensed the tension in her voice and immediately wanted to help. "Don't worry, Mrs. Thompson. I can come over this morning and take a look. What's the address?" She provided her details, and we scheduled an appointment for 11 a.m. As I prepared my tools and loaded them into my van, I couldn't shake the feeling that this visit might be more complicated than just a broken sink. The drive to Mrs. Thompson's house took about 20 minutes. It was a modest, single-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As I parked in the driveway, I noticed a few toys scattered around the yard: a bicycle, a soccer ball, and a skateboard. It looked like a typical family home, but the tension in Mrs. Thompson's voice had hinted at underlying issues. I walked up to the door and rang the bell. Almost immediately the door swung open, and a young boy, round 9 or 10 years old, stood there. He had a mischievous glint in his eyes and a scowl on his face. "Who are you?" he demanded. "I'm Mike the plumber. I'm here to fix your sink," I replied, forcing a smile. "Mom, the plumber's here," the boy yelled over his shoulder, then turned back to me and glared. "You better not mess anything up." Before I could respond, Mrs. Thompson appeared at the door looking flustered. "I'm so sorry about that. Please come in," she said, ushering me inside. "This is my son, Jake." Jake continued to stare at me suspiciously as I followed Mrs. Thompson to the kitchen. The sink was in worse shape than I had anticipated. It wasn't just a simple clog or a leaky faucet. The pipes looked old and corroded. "I see the problem," I said, assessing the situation. "I'll need to replace some parts. It might take a couple of hours." "Thank you so much," Mrs. Thompson said, visibly relieved. "I really appreciate you coming out on such short notice." As I started working, I couldn't help but notice Jake hovering nearby, watching my every move. At first, he was just standing there, arms crossed, but then he started getting more involved. He began kicking me lightly on the legs. I tried to ignore it, thinking he might just be seeking attention. "Hey, buddy, can you give me some space? I need to focus on fixing this," I said gently, hoping he would take the hint. Instead, he started kicking harder. It wasn't painful, but it was incredibly annoying. "Jake, please stop," I repeated, my patience wearing thin. He just smirked and continued his antics. This went on for several minutes, making it increasingly difficult for me to concentrate. Finally, I decided to speak to Mrs. Thompson. "Could you possibly tell your son to please stop hitting me? While I'm working, it makes it hard to focus," I asked, trying to remain professional. Mrs. Thompson looked at me, then at Jake. "What do you mean? Is he hurting you?" she asked, her tone more curious than concerned. "No, not really. I'm just trying to focus, and it's annoying," I replied, struggling to keep my frustration in check. "So if he's not hurting you, what does it matter?" she shot back, her tone shifting to defensive. "Well, I'm trying to focus, and it's quite aggravating," I explained. Turning to her son, she asked, "Jake, is this true?" "Yes," Jake answered, surprisingly honest. "Well, it's my house, and our rules are different," she said, crossing her arms. "Are you serious?" I asked, bewildered. "Yes, I am. My son is allowed to hit you because you are on the premises of my house." I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. At that moment I decided I couldn't work under these conditions. I started packing up my tools. "What are you doing? I paid good money for your services," Mrs. Thompson exclaimed. "I'll make sure you get a refund," I said as I walked out the door and drove away. From what I know, this hadn't happened to any other service people who had visited her house before. No one had mentioned a kid hitting them, and no one had walked out on her except her husband, apparently. Mrs. Thompson did receive her refund, and I moved on to my next job. But the experience left a lasting impression on me. It wasn't just about the physical annoyance of being kicked. It was the sheer entitlement and lack of respect that Mrs. Thompson displayed. It made me appreciate the polite and respectful customers I usually encountered. In my line of work, you encounter all sorts of people. Most are kind and grateful for the help. But then there are those like Mrs. Thompson and Jake who think that just because you're in their home, they can treat you however they want. It's a reminder that no matter how skilled you are at your job, dealing with people requires its own set of skills. I hope sharing this story helps others in similar situations. Sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it means walking away from a job. No one should have to endure disrespect, especially when they're there to help. This incident also made me think about parenting and the kind of behavior it encourages. Jake's actions were a reflection of what he had been taught. If children are allowed to hit and disrespect adults, especially those there to provide a service, it sets a dangerous precedent. It's crucial for parents to instill respect and manners in their children. After this incident, I became more cautious about the environments I was working in. I made sure to communicate clearly with clients about boundaries and expectations. It's important to create a professional atmosphere where mutual respect is a given. In the end, it's just one of many stories from my career as a plumber. It stands out not because of the technical challenge, but because of the human interaction. It's a story that reminds me why I love what I do and why I also need to protect myself. Being a plumber isn't just about fixing pipes and drains. It's about navigating the complexities of human behavior, standing up for oneself, and maintaining professionalism in the face of entitlement and disrespect. This experience, while negative, taught me valuable lessons that I carry with me to this day.